Who will claim the Iron Throne? Once we've climbed all the chaotic ladders, fought all the battles, and rolled the final credits, which of our many characters will sit astride the big pointy chair? My name is Theta, and today's video seeks to answer that question as we await Game of Thrones' final season. This is a little bit different than what I normally do on my channel, but longtime viewers that have paid attention to my wardrobe should not be shocked at all to discover that I am a huge Game of Thrones fan. There are any number of things to speculate about in the story which remains, but the main thrust of this video is simply guessing who will be seated in that coveted place when all is said and done. Unsurprisingly, today's video will contain spoilers from every season of the show, so consider yourself warned. I'm not going to make you wait though. I'll give my answer now, and we'll spend the rest of our runtime justifying it. At the very end of things, I believe that our much fought over symbol of power will be occupied by no one. No one will sit the Iron Throne. I'm not being cheeky and saying that it's Arya, by the way.
No one.
A man is not being cute. I am saying that when we get to our finale, there won't be anyone to ascend the throne. Not because there is no one left, but because the throne itself will no longer exist. Thus I call this Thronebreaker theory. The way I arrived at this conclusion follows two paths, and I will go ahead and roll our title sequence so we can get the progress meter running. The first way is theme, the why of a storyteller ending things in this manner, the thematic rationale. The second way is narrative, the how of arriving at that point, the narrative path. Then at the end, I'll just have a few thoughts to tie us toward another speculation that I'm fond of, and how that ties back into our first section on theme. Starting off then, the thematic rationale, the why of the ending. Theme in a story is what it is about, the ideas that are explored by the manner in which the story is told. There are any number of ways to tell us that this happened, and then this happened. The choices a storyteller makes about what events to include and how to present them can encode meaning. It can suggest ideas beyond the scope of what is literally happening in scene. This is accomplished by exploring these thematic ideas at different points in the work, and by touching them repeatedly, we are able to infer their importance. So, one of the key aspects of theme is that it arises from patterns, of having the same concept or element come up over and over. I say on my channel all the time that one of the best tools for speculation is theme, and it's because themes are intrinsically patterns. Any writer worth their salt will explore their main themes throughout the entirety of their work. They won't suddenly abandon them in favor of new and unexplored ones. Because of this, recognizing a thematic pattern in the earlier part of a work creates an understanding of its future direction. The same ideas will come up again. A good story is predictable. I mean that in the sense that it is able to be predicted. The future should arise out of the past, with the outcome almost inevitable in hindsight. But while a good story should be predictable, it should not be obvious. The audience should be left guessing about the future throughout the telling. Succeeding at this is a big part of what has made Game of Thrones so famous. It surprises us. Often this is with character deaths, overturning the assumption that important characters in a story are safe.
Anyone can be killed.
But the many surprise deaths are just a subset of this pattern of catching us off guard. And it's able to catch us off guard because it knows what we think will happen. From the very beginning, the story has carefully managed audience expectations. Take, for example, all the sex and violence, which is something else it is famous for. The show isn't full of nudity and sexuality and gore because it's on HBO. Rather, hitting the audience with such R-rated content in a fantasy story tells us from the very beginning that this is not Middle-earth. This is not Hogwarts or Narnia. This will not be what you expect from a show with dragons and magic. This is not a world where the difference between righteous and evil is so stark, where people can easily be separated into good guys and bad guys. That's a departure from a lot of fantasy, and the flawed, complicated characters are a large part of what gives the series its staying power. But This is hardly the end of overturning fantasy conventions. Behaving honorably will win the day in many heroic tales, but here...
You don't fight with honor.
No. He did.
Sometimes in grand political drama, duty will come between a character and their love. But usually, love is so important of an idea that choosing one's beloved will still turn out well. Ooh. Well, in that case, maybe choosing duty over love is the intended lesson.
I should have stayed in that cave.
I see. Well, at least we can count on a major hero or villain dying being a huge event that carries its own gravitas. The undefeated, swaggering warrior will go down in an epic clash, not the side effects of a little scratch. Oh. Well, then at least such a character won't be, I don't know, shot unceremoniously on the toilet? They will. Well, at least that will be toward the end of a season as a type of climax. You wouldn't have such a major character die in just the second episode of a season. Or you would. Well then, maybe there is one storytelling certainty we can count on. The person who connects most of the other characters together and gets the most screen time is the main character. And the main character never dies in the first season. If you take nothing else from this video, I want you to recognize this trend of deliberately running counter to what we expect. Reflect on everything you think will happen right now, or the people you assume will stand triumphant. Based on the work we've seen so far, the smart money is that the obvious expected results are not going to be the actual results. Now, the way this overturning of expectations rises to the level of a thematic pattern is in how the characters constantly have their original beliefs about their world upended. It's as if they themselves buy into the tropes in fantasy stories, as though they start on the same page as the audience. Storytellers in their world, and in ours, will create tales where a character triumphs when choosing duty or love or honor over something pragmatic, and it's because they want to elevate the importance of duty or love or honor. These are principles they deem important, and so their story presents such as having power all their own. The power to create a favorable outcome for any who would choose them. Those who hear these stories and believe in them may thus start out believing the truths they present. As it happens, a lot of character development in the series stems from our cast having their idealistic notions get a rude awakening from reality. Littlefinger spells this mindset out plainly.
The little hero always beats the big villain in all the stories.
Sansa has this romantic view of life in the southern courts and what it would be like to be betrothed to the kingdom's dashing young prince. But things turned out differently. Jon Snow has an idea of the Night's Watch as this sacred, noble duty. But even before he gets to the Wall, he discovers that his comrades are rapers and thieves, that the Night's Watch is a depository for the undesirables of Westeros. Theon Greyjoy had a certain expectation for how the king's son would be welcomed home. Fair to say he was disappointed. Over and again, we have disillusionment arise from the unexpected reality. Robert Baratheon finds kingships to be a burden. The Hound has a bitterly negative impression of knighthood because of his brother's example.
I'm no sir.
Jaime has had to swear so many conflicting oaths that for a time he'd lost all faith in the idea. And Dany believes that eradicating slavery would be well received, or that the people of Westeros really longed for her family's return, or that saving someone will make them grateful. And so, the things characters believe in repeatedly end up disappointing them. Right now in the story, what a lot of our cast believes in, hopes for, strives toward, is putting the right person on the Iron Throne. The characters expect this to be the centerpiece of an eventual showdown between the powers of Westeros, and the audience believes it right along with them. Even the Game of Thrones marketing team has gotten in on this, submitting "For the Throne" as the promotional hashtag, distributing posters of 20 contenders seated there, making those hidden throne props to place throughout our world, creating an ominous version of the White Walker art from Season 3 in the shape of the throne itself, and so on. All of the focus is on the Iron Throne and what it represents. the final prize, the reason for the story, even the name of the series.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win, or you die.
What would be more unexpected than having the throne gone by the end? But this would be more than just a twist to catch us unawares. Throughout the work, we've seen that the reality of the throne is one more thing that isn't living up to its ideals. The Iron Throne was created by Aegon the Conqueror, taking 1,000 swords from the vanquished armies of Westeros, and melting them down with dragonfire into a single pointy chair. This symbolizes that all their power is now under him, sure, but it also represents the unification of these people under one banner for the first time. The Iron Throne is a symbol of unity, even if it is a unity enforced by conquest. However, our series is all about how the quest for the throne has divided people. Political intrigue, assassinations, constant open warfare, all of it has arisen from people maneuvering toward the throne itself. King Robert understood it perfectly when contemplating the possible threat of a Dothraki invasion.
Now we've got as many armies as there are men with gold in their purse.
With the threat of the Night King marching south, there has never been a more important time for Westeros to be united, and yet the struggle to claim the crown has left them fractured and untrusting and depleted. The symbol that should have unified humanity and made them well positioned to meet the threat from the north has instead left them as vulnerable as they have been in recorded history. That's like the opposite of what Aegon probably meant. Likewise, the people of the realm who should have thrived under its protection have instead been subjected to endless hardship. When Dany insists that the people pray for their return, Jorah lays it out plainly.
The common people pray for rain, health, and a summer that never ends.
The people in charge do not lose sleep over the fates of those underneath them.
Hundreds will die.
Thousands.
The people. You think I care?
That seems to encompass the unfortunate reality of the struggle for the throne, at odds with the romantic notions that many characters believe about it. Does that sound like a bit of a pattern by now? Thus, for the symbol that is supposed to represent unified kingdoms to not be the final prize does two things. One is that it thematically matches all the previous examples of having the ideal of a thing end up at odds with the reality of it, and the other is that it will be completely unexpected to characters and audience alike, which, again, has been a consistent pattern. The reality of the Seven Kingdoms is not represented by the single throne, but could be more accurately represented by a throne pulled apart into many pieces. That is the outcome I now expect. The fact that it is even still referred to as the Seven Kingdoms belies the idea that they are unified. It also fits well with the series' constant exploration of the nature of power.
Power resides where men believe it resides.
We've been given many examples of a symbol of power or authority ultimately proven to be insubstantial. I think the throne is simply going to be the final example. Now, I confess that stripping the meaning from the Iron Throne could be represented by having the Night King win, and our final shots are of an intact throne that now presides over no living members of Westeros. So my theory does make one unfounded assumption, that the Night King is ultimately overcome. I assume the living win, and to do so will mean the end of our titular seat of power. In fact, this throne whose pursuit currently divides them may end up being the very thing that helps save them. How it could end up that way comprises our second part, the narrative path. What events could lead to this thematic resolution? It starts, as the series itself does, with the White Walkers. How does one fight against the undead? On an individual level, we've learned that only certain things spell their end. Fire does the trick, and dragonfire seems particularly effective. Even things created by powerful fires work, which is why the volcanic dragonglass can do the deed. It's why it was so important that Jon travel to Dragonstone and try to secure the cache there. And these things all make sense. The Night King is presented as the antithesis to the Lord of Light, for whom flame is sacred and is the realm of his power, ice and fire. But there is a seeming outlier. Valyrian steel can also kill the White Walkers, something the show has made explicit. Why does Valyrian steel work, but not normal steel? What makes it different? The process to make Valyrian steel disappeared along with the nation of its origin, Valyria. All of the Valyrian steel swords we see throughout the show are held in high regard and passed along as heirlooms because they cannot make more of them. The secret has been lost. This mystery is the centerpiece of my theory, at least how I think it plays out narratively. I am going to assert that Valyrian steel is not an outlier at all, that the reason it kills White Walkers is consistent with the other methods. Valyria is famous for the swords which survive it, but it's also famous because it's where dragons come from. Dragons which had died out in the world as surely as their homeland. Thus it follows that the reason no one has been able to recreate Valyrian steel in all this time is because they were missing a key ingredient: dragonfire. Suddenly, its use as an anti-White Walker weapon makes perfect sense. It works for the exact same reason as dragonglass. Fire is the only thing that works, it's just that fire can take several different forms. This link is a little more plain in the books, where it is rumored that dragonfire and magic go into the creation of Valyrian steel, but it's just an unverified rumor, of which there is no short supply. Now, on a smaller scale, a few people armed with Valyrian steel can make a difference, but there's not enough of it to be useful on the scale of armies. For that size conflict, you either need dragons to provide a constant weapon against them, or you need the giant mountain of dragonglass that they secured from Dragonstone. But I suspect Dany will not be so cavalier with her remaining 2 dragons, considering what happened last time, which is to say nothing of what it will mean to have one of them used by the Night King himself. The dragons are not enough by themselves. Thus, a key part of this theory is another speculation entirely. They will lose all that dragon glass. It doesn't have to happen, but it seems like a good way to turn up the pressure. Most likely, this means they will lose access to Dragonstone. My guess right now is that Euron Greyjoy will take it when he returns with the Golden Company. If that happens, it's a clue that my little theory here may be in play. So, based on the assumption that the dragons are sidelined, and the cache of potential dragonglass weaponry is put beyond reach, how would our characters meet the encroaching horde? I don't know exactly how things will go at Winterfell. That is a speculation for someone else. Maybe it gets swept away, maybe it becomes an island of refuge in a sea of undead. Maybe the repeated adage about how there must always be a Stark in Winterfell ends up being more than just words. Regardless, I believe that the Night King makes his way into the Southlands, bringing winter alongside, and will constantly grow in strength by adding the dead to his ranks. I'm sure there will be give and take. The dragons will probably make another appearance. Our good friend Wildfire may get in on the action as well. But I think eventually the Horde or the Night King himself will advance all the way to King's Landing, perhaps even the Red Keep. A desperate and apocalyptic moment. Yet somewhere along the way, someone is going to figure out my speculated truth about Valyrian steel. This may be the reason we were shown Sam stealing his father's blade, or maybe it's something else we can learn from Bran. However it goes down, the link is then understood, that even things melted by dragonfire retain some of their walker-killing powers. Thus, when the situation looks dire, and they are helpless with such a tiny complement of effective weapons, someone is going to look around the Great Hall and realize that there are hundreds of swords imbued with dragonfire just sitting there. You can equip a small army with anti-walker implements. All you have to do is break the throne apart. The idea that the throne may retain some of Balerion's original potency has some additional evidence. In fact, it is this detail that set me down the path towards this theory. It's another thing that's more plain in the books, but the swords which make up the throne are still sharp. Aegon the Conqueror intended the throne to be treacherous, a reminder to those who sit on it how dangerous it is to wear the crown. It's basically an upside-down sword of Damocles. The Mad King evidently cut himself so often that he was also referred to as the Scab King, and some saw the throne harming him as proof that he was unfit to rule. However, The throne is 300 years old by the time of the Mad King. That's not how normal swords work. They lose their edge with time and with use. But one of the big reasons Valyrian steel is so prized is because of this quality. They stay sharp forever. Something happened to the swords in the Iron Throne to preserve their edges, and this mimics the coveted nature of Valyrian steel. Having the throne still cut the unfit king all those years later seems like a delightful example of a metaphor leaking into reality, but I think it's also a clever way of masking a clue to the Dragonfire link. It's certainly not something I would put past Martin, who I think loves to toy with us. This is the guy who made Rickon Stark's entire character journey into a giant shaggy dog story, and then has the cheekiness to have Rickon name his direwolf Shaggy Dog.
Here, Shaggy Dog.
There's another hint of this possible link. The very first thing we see that is named as Valyrian steel is the dagger sent to take Bran's life. It's visually striking and is shown repeatedly, but what makes it striking is its elaborate handle, which is special as well.
The blade is Valyrian steel, the handle dragonbone.
Dragonbone. The link between Valyrian steel and the dragons is there from almost the beginning, right under our noses. The throne is made possible by the power of dragons and the power of fire.
For dragons are fire made flesh, and fire is power.
It retains their essence literally and represents their power symbolically. Yet, a constant lesson in the series is how often the pursuit of power brings such pursuers low.
Nothing is worth what this will cost you, not even the iron.
I know more about it.
But is it the power itself that destroys them, or the reasons they seek the power, the things they would do with the power? All the contenders like the idea of being King of the Andals and the First Men and Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, but how many are excited about being the Protector of the Realm? That role and title often gets assigned to someone else. These misplaced priorities are actually made plain in what is almost the last scene in the first season.
When dead men, and worse, come hunting for us in the night, do you think it matters who sits on the Iron Throne?
The Iron Throne is always viewed as a weapon to wield, as a sword. But if my theory has merit, then at the end it will instead be a shield to guard the realms of men. Or not, it's just a theory. But it would at least let the throne fulfill its ideal, just not in the way expected. And that, too, is a pattern in the series. The Hound disparages knighthood as a lie, yet in his treatment of the Stark sisters, he embodies knighthood more than almost any other character. Sansa is shocked helpless by the realities of court life, yet eventually becomes the shrewd and formidable Lady of Winterfell, trapping the master schemer himself. Even Jaime rekindles belief in the idea of oaths, just not at all in the way he probably expected.
Oathkeeper.
Will we thus be surprised if the throne fulfills its ideal in an unlooked-for manner? Even if my theory is wrong, what I like about it is that it plays well with a lot of other theories out there. I'll mention just one in particular, my favorite version of how the Azor Ahai prophecy may play out. I can't take credit for this, but the interpretation basically goes that Rhaegar Targaryen really was Azor Ahai as he originally believed. Lyanna becomes Nissa Nissa in this version, and together they forge the weapon Lightbringer. But it is not a literal sword quenched by being run through Nissa Nissa's heart's blood, or a sword anointed in fire as Melisandre seems to believe. Rather, Lightbringer is a different kind of weapon, a weapon named Jon Snow. The heart's blood which quenches him is the blood of Lyanna's birthing bed. He is reforged just as Lightbringer due to his death and resurrection. That same resurrection makes him a Firewight, a being of fire. Arguably, he is also reforged by taking the vows of the Night's Watch, vows which include the words, "I am the sword in the darkness," as well as, "I am the fire that burns against the cold, the lights that brings the dawn, lights that brings the dawn, light bringer." One could argue that the Night's Watch itself is thus Lightbringer, and whoever wields it, that is, whoever is Lord Commander, is functionally Azor Ahai. which I guess means Dolorous Ed is Azor Ahai. What a twist. Regardless of whether those interpretations are accurate, I'm pretty sure Jon Snow will figure into this Thronebreaker theory of mine. After all, who do you imagine is capable of making the decision to destroy the throne in order to protect the people? Not Cersei, I wager. Dany has been on a quest for it nearly the whole series. She would surely pursue some other possibility first.
Look away, Khaleesi.
No.
They, and others who see it only as the symbol of rule over Westeros, will have difficulty even conceiving of its destruction. Jon Snow doesn't want that power. And yet, he keeps finding himself in situations where he will take on the burden of leadership for some greater good. This is a pattern with the other Starks, and a way their idea of the role of power differs from many of the rest. Robb Stark didn't want the Iron Throne, just to go home and be king in the North. He also tells of how Ned Stark likened being a lord to being a parent, worrying about your subjects like a father worries over his children. They do think of power as a shield instead of as a sword. I don't think many in Westeros could make the choice to break the throne, though I confess that Dany making that decision would be very meaningful, she who has been fighting for it for so long. I would even consider it proof that she is worthy to rule.
I'm going to break the wheel.
In general, though, everyone is too attached to ceremony and tradition. They conflate the symbols of power with power itself. When their sense of how things are supposed to be conflicts with pragmatism, they resist. But Jon Snow has already made a choice like this. When he let the wildlings through the wall, he upset the normal course of things. But to him, the choice to both save these people and have their aid in holding the wall overrode any loyalty to the traditional understanding of the Night's Watch. He would make the choice to tear that throne apart to save the realm. And I've been calling him Jon Snow, but that's not really his name, is it? We found out that he is the legitimate son of Rhaegar, and is the true heir to the throne, the one contender that doesn't even want it. To further that irony, his name is actually Aegon, the very same as the man who originally built it. You think that's just a coincidence? Of course, when Aegon made the decision to let the wildlings through, it didn't matter whether that was the right choice or not. It didn't matter if it saved lives. They killed him for it. If he is the one responsible for breaking the Iron Throne, how do you think people will react?